times their weight. 50 times? That's like bench pressing a bulldozer.
Yeah, so think of what he could do to us.
Hey guys, Ralph here from the Endgame Investor. Today I wanted to go into what the central banks are doing regarding gold holdings, gold reserves. Are they buying? Are they selling? What is going on? We're going to go into some of the top holders if they're making any significant moves. But really, I wanted to go into the mechanics of the basis trade. You know, when you sort of understand something enough to explain it in a very crude, rudimentary way, and then somebody writes something that helps you understand it more fully, and then you're like, whoa, I never really understand it in the first place, and then you do. Well, that happened with me in the basis trade. Not that I didn't understand it, I didn't understand it fully until Robin Wigglesworth of FT, that's the Financial Times, and yes, his name is
Freaking freezing in here, Mr.
Wigglesworth. That might be a pen name, but I'm not sure why anyone would change their name to Robin Wigglesworth from whatever it might have been.
You mean you changed it to the train?
Yeah, used to be shithouse.
It's a good change. It's a good change.
But I came across an article that he wrote that explained the mechanics of it in very simple terms that anyone, I think, can understand. And they can also understand that when the repo dollars run out, how this trade mechanically implodes and what happens next. I know a lot of people have been saying, Laffy, when's this going to happen? You keep saying a month or two, you keep saying 3 or 4 months, you keep saying next year, and always keep pushing out. Well, I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but I can show you the numbers and the numbers we have to get to and what will happen when you reach those numbers, and you can see the trajectory. And the main number that I'm looking out for is the repos to reserves ratio, meaning how much of the available bank reserves are being used by the repo market, which is being used to fund the basis trades. We're going to be looking at the basis trades. We're going to be looking at the repo volume. We're going to be looking at the reserves. And when these things blow up, that will be the sprint to the end game, in my opinion. If I'm wrong about that, then what would happen is that we would see a huge blow up in the repo market. The Fed print $3, $4, $5 trillion in the next few weeks after that, and then the dollar will still be fine. That's what I do not think is going to happen. We just have to wait for the bank reserves to run out, the repo market to implode, and then the Fed to print trillions of dollars, and I think that will be the sprint to the end game of the monetary system. And by the way, this video is brought to you by myself, the Endgame Investor. Check it out on Substack, where you can get my take on things 3 times a week. Also, get your gold and silver at Miles Franklin, link in the description below, and mention the Endgame Investor either online or on the phone. And then you can take your gold and silver that you bought at Miles Franklin and stick it in a Dirty Man safe. Use the link in the description below and use the code ENDGAME10 at checkout for 10% off. And though I don't recommend storing all of your gold and silver at home in a Dirty Man safe underground, I do think it is a good idea to store at least some of it on hand in a place where people cannot find it. So in an emergency situation, like let's say all of Spain and Portugal, where the entire power grid went out because of too much solar or whatever, you'll be able to have gold and silver on hand without trying to get online to tell your broker or whoever it is that you store it with that you want some of your gold, and then he'll have to use the electric grid to send it to you, and he can't because there's no power. But anyway, let's continue with the slides, and we'll begin with gold reserves by country. What's going on with China and its gold reserves? If we were to move my beautiful face up here to the corner so we can see the full graph, China is buying a bit of gold, but really not much, not since late 2021, early 2022. You can see here that it's been going up slightly since 2021, 2022, but really that's about 1.8, 1.9 thousand tons, and now it's at 2.1, 2.2. Not really that much, but still they have been buying some. Are they behind the gold surge? Who knows? Probably not. India is buying a little bit more, at least by percentage. We can see here that they really started buying in 2018, and they've been buying pretty consistently since then. They've continued buying into 2024. We don't have the numbers for 2025 yet from this massive rally since the Trump inauguration and beyond. That hit 3,500. Now we're back to like 3,350, and we're hanging around there. India is doing a pretty good job buying gold, and we know that its culture is very heavy into gold buying as savings. We've seen those pictures of the Indian brides that are bejeweled and bedecked in gold that probably weighs more than they do when they're fully dressed. That should be a pretty good workout for anyone's wedding, especially if you're a bride. I'm not sure what the grooms do. Japan bought a huge chunk of gold in 2021 and has not bought any since then. They are out of the picture for now, not really influencing gold prices in Japan. Turkey, a lot of people cite this country as being heavy into gold buying, but you can see Turkey is really all over the place. They buy and sell, trying to manipulate their currency back up after it collapses, and it never really works. It works very ephemerally, as it worked for a few months, even Weimar Germany in 1923, I think early 1923 or 1922, they sold a bunch of gold and the currency went up for about 2 or 3 months, and then it continued to crash to zero. So we see here that in 2011, from Q1 to Q2 2011, Turkey sold about 80% of its gold, from 542 tons down to 116 tons, and then started buying again around 2017. They are now at a new peak of gold reserves, about 565, 567 tons, and that is impressive, but they keep buying and selling, as you can see here, up and down, up and down. And who knows, with Turkey, they could sell substantially all of their gold reserves at any time, as they have done in the past, especially because the Turkish lira is continuing to collapse, and it won't stop collapsing because they keep printing more money. Poland actually is buying a lot of gold. They've been doing it consistently, and they've continued to up their gold purchases since around 2019. You can see here in Q1 2023, they had 228.6 tons. Now they have 448, almost doubling their gold supplies, their gold stocks in 7 quarters, about 2 years. That's pretty impressive. Poland might be influencing the price a little bit here. Kazakhstan was cited in the last few years as a gold accumulator. That has been true, but lately they have been selling, down from a peak of 402 tons to now 284. These central banks are all over the place. They try to use gold to manipulate their currencies. They don't really understand that gold is actually money. Thailand has been mum since Q2 of 2021. They have not bought any since then. They had 154 tons in Q1 2021, up to 244.16 tons in Q2 of 2021, and now they are at 225 or so, something around there. Not much going in Thailand. That is basically it for the countries of note. If I didn't mention them, they are either selling or stagnant. The top gold holders in the world are not really doing that much, except for maybe India and Poland and a little bit of China, but that's it. Now we're going to get to the basis trade and Robin Wigglesworth. It's freaking leveraged in there, Mr. Wigglesworth. So, Robin Wigglesworth describes the basis trade, and I'll put a link to this article in the description below from the FT. These are 2 paragraphs from that article that explain it very succinctly, and you can understand from these words why it can lead to a disaster. Let's say, says Robin Wigglesworth, you put down 10 million for treasuries and sell an equal value of futures. In that case, I'm adding, the treasuries that you bought are backing the futures. If you want to sell futures short, then you need the actual treasuries to back it, or your broker won't let you do it because it's unsafe. So, for example, if you want to sell a gold contract short, you need the market value of that gold contract in your account, or the broker will not let you do it. Same for treasuries. So they put down 10 million for actual treasury paper, and they sell an equal value of futures that is theoretically balanced, and the broker lets you do it. Next sentence, you can use the treasuries that you're using to back your short position. You can use them as collateral in the repo market for, say, 9.9 million of short-term loans in the repo market. You can take those treasuries, which are backing your short positions, and give them to a bank for repo loans, and you get a little bit less than 10 million because of the interest rates for lending overnight in the repo market. But you have $9.9 million of cash now, right? What do you do with that? You buy another $9.9 million of treasuries, sell an equivalent amount of treasury futures, and then repeat the process again and again and again.
Again and again. And again and again and again.
So you have these treasuries that are backing simultaneously your short positions in the treasury market, and they are collateral for getting repo loans in the repo market. That is what is fueling all this times and doing it again and again and again. Each time you do it, that's another level of leverage. So it says here, it's hard to get a firm idea of what is the typical amount of leverage that hedge funds use for treasury basis trades, meaning how many times do they buy treasuries and then use the treasuries as collateral for repo and then buy more treasuries with that repo money and then use the treasuries for collateral for more repo loans and keep doing it again and again. How much do they do that every day? He says here, Alphaville gathers, meaning Alphaville is his section of the FT that he writes for, gathers that as much as 50 times.
50 times their weight. 50 times? That's like bench pressing a bulldozer.
Yeah, so think of what he could do to us.
Drop to 50!
Yeah, 50! Woo!
Is normal, and up to 100 times can happen. In other words, just $10 million of capital can support as much as $1 billion of treasury purchases. And so now we're going to get into the scary stuff, and that is the repo volume. You can see the repo volume. This is the repo volume. This is billions of dollars. You can see that it started really getting out of control starting in around January 2023, and it is on a very steady trajectory. We are at now $2.565 trillion in repo dollars. Where do these dollars come from? They come from bank reserves, which are shrinking generally because of quantitative tightening, which has slowed down recently. But the point that I try to make on the endgame investor is that once the Treasury has to raise the debt ceiling and it has to raise a bunch of money in order to spend on all the stuff that it spends, it has to suck money out of bank reserves in order to get that money. And these bank reserves are being used to fund these basis trades, these repo funded trades to the tune of $2.565 trillion now. And I'll show you how they're funding the basis trades. You can see here, this is the 2-year Treasury note COT reports. It shows you how many are short and how many are long. That's always balanced, but the more short and the more long, the more parties are taking advantage of repo dollars in the repo market to fund these trades. So you see here in that circle, that is where the repo volume starts to take off. And we are now at 1.95 million contracts in short. Here it was about 750,000, so it has more than doubled since 2023, which is when the repo volume started to take off. You can see how the repo volume, how the repo dollars are funding these trades. This was the previous repocalypse over here. We are much worse than that now, or much more leveraged than that now, because they are using so many more bank reserves to fund so many more basis trades. But it's the 5-year basis trade, which is much more leveraged than the 2-year basis trade. We can see that the 2-year, the COTs, or the amount of shorts in the 2-year Treasury note futures, is 1.94 million, while the 5-year basis trade is 3.445 million. You can see how obscene this is over here. If you go over here where 2019 meets 2020 around September, this is where the repocalypse happened, the last one where my cursor is circling over here. This is where we are now. It's much worse in the 5-year basis trade than the 2-year basis trade. This is where the real leverage is happening. And what happens when it unwinds? Well, if treasuries are being used to back your short positions in the treasury futures market, and they're also being used as collateral to borrow more dollars in the repo market, if the repo dollars run out in the middle of the night because there aren't any more, and what happens is one party does not get its treasuries back, and the whole trade unwinds very quickly. If you've got two parties that claim the treasuries as collateral, something is going to fall, and it's going to cause a domino of all these parties that are involved in it to lose everything very quickly, unless and until the Fed prints the difference. And that's what I'm talking about. Trillions of dollars being printed overnight in the next repocalypse, and from there we go into the end game. And because this is going to happen, we can see the numbers going up in the repo volume and the reserves going down in bank reserves, which will come down even faster when the Fed raises the debt ceiling. It is only a matter of time, and not very long at that, until this happens. In the meantime, you can still get gold and silver at Miles Franklin. Use the link in the description below and mention the Endgame Investor, and you can take your gold and silver and store it in a Dirty Man safe using the code ENDGAME10 at checkout for 10% off. If you would like also religious lessons in monetary policy, this week we're going to go into the hidden nature of gold and how it was intended to be hidden from humanity, but God gave it to us as a favor to facilitate trade. We'll be going into the ancient sources regarding that little tidbit of goodness. In the meantime, this is Rafi, the Endgame Investor, and I'll see you guys on Thursday.